Just take 2.
So I'm doing, it's just like a 5-page. It's like English 101. And,
yeah, you have to write about something.
So I'm just doing a paragraph on, holy cow, what am I doing? I'm doing one on coral.
Oh, just a paragraph about coral stuff?
No, so I'm doing, it's all about coral. One, I'm trying to think how I broke down the paragraphs. The first one is about, why coral reefs are important. The second one's about like the current health and happenings of coral in Hawaii, and then the third one's like what is being done to help mitigate or reduce like the damage being done to corals.
Yeah.
And
did you know I've written that exact essay like 5 times?
No, you should just take Lily's essay.
Yeah.
Lily's got one for you.
Science fair last year and the ecosystem one.
Yeah, she wrote a whole paper about it.
2 whole papers. And then I always done one more almost. I need to write it up. But it's good. I'm like an expertess.
Like,
yeah, you should be interviewing Lily. Lily, you want to help? Okay.
she wants it all to be quoted from scholarly articles or
you're
somebody who's qualified.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of papers. I would also probably reference some of the actual publications.
I have. Like for I don't really need anything for the first paragraph. Like,
yeah.
That one's easy. But like, I don't know, having a actual
yeah, and I can definitely lead you in the right direction for all of everything else.
The last two, like the current health, and then I mean the part that you're actually involved in is the like conservation.
Right. Okay, so what do you have for the first bit? Why they're important? You can talk about that for one quick second.
I mean, I just have I just wrote the basic stuff. Like it supports the ecosystems and lots of people depend on them, like used to depend on them, and it's important culturally and like worldwide. Like it supports like
I can't remember
half a billion people worldwide.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers flying around. I can't remember any of them on the top of my head. I hear them all the time though. There's a lot of similar quoted numbers. Like some of the ones you'll hear is 25% of marine species live in coral reef ecosystems, not by total biomass in the ocean, but by the diversity of number of marine organisms. It's like 25%. Live in
that one's I have
marine
that one.
ecosystems.
That one's
You'll see that.
a big one.
There's another one about as far as food production, or maybe they don't even say food production, but coral reefs support a couple billion people.
There's 500 million.
500 million
so half
people
a billion
in the world.
people.
Half a billion people in the world, but it might be more than that. They provide, I can't remember how many billions of dollars of global revenue.
And then
I think like tourism and stuff like that.
Oh, I didn't consider tourism.
Yeah, tourism's a huge one. So like a lot of countries, a lot of countries, their travel economy is centered around coral reefs, right? So that factors into revenue generation in the billions and billions of dollars.
And then I have erosion. Erosion's a big one.
Coastal erosion is a huge one right now, especially for Hawaii. There's one paper they released recently. I can't remember which one it is, but basically it estimated the value of coral reefs.
Like 10 billion or something.
Yeah, or crazy. More than that. Yeah, 14, especially for Hawaii, it
was like 14 billion or something crazy.
Or maybe it is 10 or 20 billion dollars in coastal protection or something like that.
Yeah.
And those are the main ones you'll see quoted as far as the value of coral reefs.
It's just like an interview for like a writing class.
Writing?
Yeah, English 101.
Nice.
It's not too hard. I just need an expert's opinion.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think the other, and then in Hawaiian culture, it's really valuable as far as.
I did a little part about.
Okay, good. Like the Kumalipo, and it's the oldest ancestor in Hawaiian genealogy, and so there's a lot of respect and whatever reverence for that. And actually, and that's ongoing too. It's, like modern culture really is kind of having a renaissance for the Hawaiian culture towards, some of these ideas and principles, like the people in Lahaina. They're talking about rebuilding and all that kind of stuff, and so they've approached us to say, hey, like, can we actually want to start, some of this rebuilding of Lahaina with, symbolically, have you guys come and plant coral, right? Because that's where, really the birth in our genealogy came from, was coral, and so we'd like to do some restoration outside Lahaina to start the like rebuilding process. So that's kind of interesting and significant. As far as the current state of the reefs in Hawaii, Tom Oliver recently did a bunch of studies. I need to find his paper, but maybe probably not that important. But basically, what he analyzed a whole bunch of monitoring data from around the state. And pretty much every reef around our state is in basically like a recession, right? Everything is receding back. Like it's not like necessarily super, super fast, but every reef is in a downward trajectory, except for a couple pockets, like right outside the airport, for whatever reason. They call it Runway Reef.
Yeah.
Over there, it's actually like net growth is positive. Everywhere else, net growth is negative around the state. There are like small pockets, but just generally, that's kind of what the condition of the reef is. Kind of a steady decline right now. And then that goes through a lot of different pressure. Of course, you have climate change and warming is doing a lot of significant bleaching. But I think for Hawaii, we're not really getting hit hard with the climate situation yet. I think we will in the future. But for Hawaii, most of the impact and the stressors are localized, like pollution, runoff, nitrification or nutrification of the water.
Wait, and that's from agriculture?
Yeah,
sources?
so both agriculture and cesspool and septic systems.
Yeah, okay.
Right, so you get a lot of nitrogen and nutrients that come off of
and then wash down.
Those, they wash out. Or like, you picture Lightyear and our coral reefs here, and you have all these people. Well, now we're on sewer, right? So, but until recently, I'm not sure what they actually do with all that sewer water that goes out through Lightyear. Actually, I'm not sure what they do with it all. They probably re-water stuff, BYU and things. But you think about, everyone used to be on cesspools. You picture everybody has all cesspools and septic tanks all along the highway in the whole town. Well, all that water, like, all your, the solid waste, goes into the septic tank, breaks down with bacteria, chews it up, and eventually, like, all the nitrogen just leaches out into the leach field, drains into the groundwater. Well, our ground is so porous here that really it's just like then percolating out into the ocean. So you picture every house in town all kind of slowly leaking nitrogen out into the groundwater, which is leading into the ocean. That the levels of nitrogen get, quite high right along the shoreline. Or the point, right? They had all their septic systems all just leaking basically right into the water. And that's a problem because, that nitrogen basically feeds the algae. Coral generally is in pretty close competition with algae.
But
so
it also
macroalgae
depends on it, right? Doesn't the algae, my understanding is that algae cohabitates.
Yes, well, the algae
coral.
In the coral really needs the algae in the coral, the symbionts in the coral tissue.
But
those are critical.
The algae, the external.
Yeah, the macroalgae that's like growing all the turf algae is sometimes what they call it. That's all like the fuzzy crap that's growing all over the ground. That stuff is usually in direct competition with coral.
Is that
So-
because it's growing? It like is encroaching on it, or just because
Yeah,
it's
like it
a
can-
filtering thing, and the more that the grass filters, the less the.
No, it's more of a kind of a real estate
It is real estate. Okay.
kind of space,
Yeah.
physical space that it will take up, and that means the coral can occupy. And then when you get enough of it, it can kind of engulf the coral because it grows much faster than the coral.
So the nitrates are a problem because it causes the coral to eject the cohabitate, or
No,
it doesn't
no,
filter
it
as
just-
well as the
it
other
just-
algae.
Nope, neither. It just, it's basically like stimulates the growth of all the algae real quick. So it makes all the ground, basically, it gives the algae an advantage to outgrow the coral. That's the problem with
Okay,
it. Not
yeah.
necessarily that it's so super damaging to the coral or anything like that. It's really that
It's
it
just
just
more beneficial
you're
to the
basically
coral,
feeding
yeah.
the algae, which can uptake all that nitrogen real quick and just grow faster. And so that's the real problem with it. You're giving when you have a lot of nitrification, you give the algae, macroalgae, you give the edge, and then it has an easier time out competing the coral.
Okay, and then so nitrification is a big issue. I have also heard that you deal with a lot of man-made damages to the reefs. I've heard that you've
Yeah.
repaired anchors, chains.
Yeah, right. So that's another big one, right? So there's, so the nitrification. Then you also have just like general like pollution, right? Like heavy metals and whatever other pollutions,
So does
herbicides and things that are coming off of
Is the pollution the same thing?
as the
is-
nitrification.
Yeah,
They're kind of different.
they are different.
They're similar. They're kind of related. Like it is chemical
yeah, I mean the
changes.
effect of the pollution. Is it?
Well, that one, the pollution more so so the nitrogen just gives the algae an edge.
Yeah.
But the pollution actually damages the coral health.
Is that like
That's the
it's
problem.
absorbing
Yeah,
bad
it's
nutrients?
absorbent. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
yeah.
Right. And if you have like a bunch of algicides coming out, right, like that will directly kill the algae inside the coral, or herbicides.
Yeah.
Right, and then,
okay,
or
yeah.
if you have like heavy metals, mercury, nitrogen,
Yeah.
mercury,
Absorb right into it.
lead,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff, that will get taken up by the coral, and that will, diminish their health. So, yeah, the pollution, the chemical pollution is more kind of directly damages coral health. The nitrification gives the algae an edge to outcompete the coral.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more general. Kind of generally, that's what you're looking at.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like in Hawaii, we also have a lot like significant anchor damage, or just use damage where boats will run aground, divers, can and snorkelers and stuff can trample and step on the coral. That's usually just right next to shoreline. That's a problem in like Hanauma Bay and Waikiki and places like that. And around the island, there are some people that go. Actually, there are fishermen that go on like reef walk, and they just basically walk across the reef and trample everything. And that's
Oh wow.
not a good way to do it. And yeah, but anchor chains are a real significant. So one anchor, you think, oh, it's just a boat with a single anchor. Like how much damage can that really do? Maybe you'll damage one coral with an anchor.
But if they anchor like we do, you have the chain drag.
Right,
along
right.
with it.
So the chain, right, and that's the bigger problem.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the damage comes from that chain, like your boat, pulls tension. You have a bunch of scope out, and that chain sweeps along the.
Is that a big
the
problem? The
seafloor.
sweeping.
Yeah,
Because it just.
because basically it's
breaks
like
the
kind of
whole-
leg sweeps, so like all the coral.
That's
See,
okay. Yeah.
right? So it's not just one anchor; it's like that whole chain. And then the winds pick up and they switch from south to north, and then all of a sudden your boat moves from one side of your long anchor
180.
all the way to the other side, and you picture that chain sweeping all the way around, depending on how much chain you have out. Or if you don't get a good anchor set, your anchor is just dragging
That's
along the
curious
bottom,
to me though, because
right?
couldn't the anchor be almost fully it could be a lot less shallow of it, like in Maine, like the tide is 15 feet,
Right.
so we need like 300 feet of rope, but the tide here is like
Yeah.
6 inches, so can't you have your anchor be almost
Yeah, a little
You
more
can-
vertical. It
a
depends
lot
on.
more vertical.
Yeah, depends on what you're up to. Depends on how big your boat is. Depends on how big your anchor
That's
is.
right. Okay.
It
yeah.
depends on how windy it is, right? Because here you'll be sitting. We anchor our boat sometimes, and the current's ripping. I don't know if you guys get the currents like we do here, but the
No.
current could be going at like 2 knots or 3 knots.
And that's
The
just
wind's
current,
the
yeah.
wind's blowing at 20 knots. Even though you're on a sailboat like that, that boat will catch the wind, and so like, it can do.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Like we have a lot of anchor line on ours, and sometimes it's pulling so hard our anchor is going kind of straight up
Oh.
instead
wow.
of the anchor
That's
line
not
is
great.
going
Yeah,
straight
okay.
up, right?
So how much
So-
line would you usually put out?
It always depends on where
Line-
we're at.
But it's above. Is it above 100 feet? It's
Oh,
not, right? It's like 50,
yeah, usually
right?
no, because sometimes we're diving at 50, 60 feet deep.
Okay, so you
So we're
would
anchored,
go.
like,
You
pretty
would go
deep.
150.
So we
200
go,
feet.
150,
200.
200 feet, and generally is how much we use. Yeah, a lot of times we're usually anchored up somewhere between 60 feet to like 30 feet deep
Okay.
in
Um,
general. But yeah, and that's something that we're really, our team is very conscious about. like,
Yeah, but
what we're
most
doing with the
people
anchor
are
and
not.
finding. Yeah, most people are gonna just look. Oh, that's good. You just throw it over. And I, admittedly, before I was kind of really involved with coral restoration, I definitely wasn't as, conscientious about the way I was using my anchor. But now we're like really like we usually put someone in the water to like scout out the spot to make sure we're not like, because for us it's a big deal if we're out there working and we, our anchor accidentally damages more coral than we're putting back. I mean, like, what's the point?
So how
May as
how
well stay home.
how significant? Yeah, how significant is the damage? Is it just like a contributing factor to the regression, or is it like actively
It,
is it a big problem?
I think it's pretty it depends on the location. So I wouldn't say it's like a big factor in kind of the widespread
Yeah,
kind of decline that we're seeing.
yeah,
Like on kind of the full scale of the
Yeah.
island, but it is localized, like local areas, like places where dive tours and people go and dive frequently and stuff and are dropping their anchor regularly. It does a lot of damage, right? Because there are certain places that are really popular dive sites, and there'll be dive companies tours or even private boats will go out there and dive. And sometimes there'll be like 10, 15 boats a day going out there. If each one of those boats is dropping an anchor, with an anchor chain, like pretty soon, like you really start to like add up. Like one time dropping the anchor is like whatever. Okay, maybe you're careful, you don't break anything. Hopefully, that's the ideal
Yeah.
situation. But if you're just kind of
every day
being
tossing
lazy, then maybe you'll damage one or two. But if you go back to that same spot every day, and then multiple times a day potentially, or at least maybe every weekend if you're a fisherman or whatever, like that amount of damage just starts to add up. Especially when you consider the anchor chain and everything else. So it does. Yeah, I didn't really appreciate it until we started to until I've been in the water a lot in these regions, like especially on the west side. Like we did this whole long dive. We probably went like a mile or two, because we were going with the current and we had our dive scooters with us, and we were actually scouting for a specific type of coral. And I was blown away by the number of this one specific type of coral that like it sticks up pretty high off the bottom. And I saw so many of those colonies. You'd come across one, and the whole thing was just exploded. They're not that common. They're not that common. They're not like a carpet of them, but
Yeah.
you'll see it. They're pretty important though. They'll be like, for every, I'm not even sure, maybe every 100 square meters, you'll have a couple of those colonies on a healthy section of reef.
Yeah.
But they're huge. Like they're our biggest coral, and they kind of stick up the most. I think they're
Those
like
are the web, like the vertical web looking ones, or
kind of. These are called an antler. Well, here they're called an antler coral. Yeah, it's Postulipora grandis. They're actually quite beautiful. But anyway, it's like on this one site, like this dive, I found a whole bunch of those colonies that were basically just exploded. Like all the pieces are scattered around. I think they're really vulnerable to like anchor
these
chains because
ones.
they stick up above the bottom. Not that one. No, this is the antler coral. It's actually this one here. These ones are the ones from like Florida. It's this one. Let's see. If you look at.
It's probably just Hawaii would do it.
Yeah, or. These guys.
Okay. Oh yeah, there's lots of crevices for the stuff
Yeah.
to catch on.
Right, and they stick up above kind of everything else down there. Especially here in Hawaii, it'll look like that, like a huge, beautiful.
But then, just
colonies,
because it's
but I
tiny
think
at the
they're
bottom,
just
they can
super-
get sliced.
Yeah, I think they're super vulnerable getting the anchor chains tangled up in them. I'm trying to find a good one of Hawaii. Actually, let's do Hawaii. Hey, Jason.
How you feeling?
Hey,
Oh, hey.
I heard you're also doing No Shave November.
Yeah. It's,
Nice. Fireman stash.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's only my
This guy. Yeah.
my commitment to it's keeping me going at this point. It's reached the like itchy phase where it's like the hairs are coming back at me, like that length.
Yeah. So those ones are pretty important. Yeah, you see a lot of damage on those. On this one dive, I saw tons of them just like exploded, and I think they were probably all taken out by anchors, is my guess, just the way they were broken. Yeah. So it does some damage.
And then you said that the climate hasn't really
Well,
because I know a big problem in like Florida is that it's
Oh,
getting
yeah,
so
Florida's
hot
crazy.
that all of the bacteria is getting ejected,
Right.
and
like
it's just bleaching
like crazy.
the whole reef.
Well, because I mean, this summer, like there was areas that got up to 100 degrees
Oh
in the ocean in Florida.
wow!
Like pretty much all they went. I talked to some friends over there. I mean, they were struggling before this year. Like their reef, whatever percent cover. You know, it's in a handful of percents. You know, maybe 5%. In some of the better areas or something, 10%, or I guess in the real nice ones or whatever. I guess there's pockets where it's more than that, but now this year they pretty much everything bleached down through there. Like they were looking at now cover at less than 1% in almost every region.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's what happened to them this year was just crazy. Cause yeah, it was just the water was over 100 degrees, and that just killed everything.
The divine
It's pretty
retribution
sad.
for the 2000 election,
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
and they could have elected Al Gore, and instead they elected George Bush, and then
Yeah.
thus setting off the cascade of events that is going to put
That's
Florida
right.
underwater.
Yeah.
It's true. They're going to be the first state to completely disappear.
Yeah, no, you're right. That
like
and
5
Louisiana,
levels.
right?
Yeah, but Florida's more directly responsible.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're not dealing. I mean, in 2014-15, we had some decent bleaching. Most of it was localized. We had some on the west side, some on the west side of the Big Island. A lot of it was in Kaneohe
I was
Bay
gonna say it's because it's shallow.
because it's shallow, like the water circulation is not